This evening's presentation, we're going to have Chris talk about the overall trip planning, logistics, maps, all sorts of stuff. Paula is going to talk about GPS. Monty is going to talk about poop, which you may laugh at, but poop on the Green River is no laughing matter. Janelle is going to talk about water, which is also no laughing matter. I'm going to talk about boats, and then we'll have a general conversation about hikes on the Green River. So without any further ado, Chris, please take it away from me.
Back in fall of last year, a group of us who'd been paddling together as kind of a COVID group, let's say, decided we should do an epic adventure. And we actually had one scheduled to go up to Canada, but we were afraid we couldn't cross the border. So we're like, we need an epic adventure in the US. And Susan Danini had paddled the Green River about 8 years earlier. And she said, why don't we do that? So we're all like, sure, why not? And so we started planning in the fall, but our trip was in May of this year. And because we started planning early, we were able to get the exact dates we wanted to get. And so, because you have a shuttle service, we used a shuttle service, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But early planning is important if you do want to use the shuttle service. And this is Paula's boat right there. And most of these photos that I'm going to share, Paula took these photos. So thank you, Paula.
Stacy's boat.
That way. Okay, Stacy's boat. I see that now. Current design. Sorry. Good looking good though, Stacy. All right. So from Portland to Moab is almost exactly 1,000 miles. Most of us did it as a 2-day drive. And we all stayed in the same motel in Moab the night before, and that made it really good for us to make sure we were all together and all ready to do the same thing. Arches National Park is right outside of Moab, and I think about 3 of us went there the day before. We got there a day early and did that, so highly recommended. And here is Moab. You know, I meant to change, can you guys see this? I meant to change this marker to something big, and then I forgot to do it. Anyway, so Moab is right here. The Green River is over here to the left. And so our shuttle picked us up, took us in Moab, drove us out over here to Green River State Park, and we launched. And we did this section here, which is a flatwater section of the Green River. And up above that is whitewater. This is the Colorado River. Up here is whitewater. Down below where we went is whitewater. Then there's Lake Powell, and below that's the Grand Canyon where people do that rafting and all that whitewater. So this is the beautiful flatwater section. And it's made up really of 2 sections, Labyrinth and Stillwater, and they are administered by 2 different agencies. We had to get permits, but it was a real easy process. I don't think there was a cost, and everybody who tries to get one gets one, so it's not an issue, but there is a little paperwork that has to be done. And so down here at the Confluence is where we were picked up by the jet boat. There is no road access at all. And so you have to use this shuttle service if you want to get out at the Confluence. So let's see here. Oh, Monty took this great photo and he wanted to be in this. So there he is, huh? Looking good, Monty. Like it. So this is part of that book that Janelle showed you. And these are the pages from the book. I actually tore my book apart and took the pages with me separately. It was just easier for me to work it that way. But we started here in Green River, and you go, you start at the bottom of the page and you work your way up. Normally, the shuttle service we used would have launched us 5 miles downstream at a little area called Crystal Geyser. And we were luckily able to launch instead at Green River, even though the first 5 miles aren't really the exciting part to see. The fact is that launching there gave us a big, beautiful area to launch in. We had bathrooms, we had a place to have lunch. And when we paddled and got to Crystal Geyser, it was a fun place to explore, but would have been like muddy, dusty. It would have been a lot more awkward place to launch our boats. So we were really happy that we were able to do it at Green River. If you would hire a shuttle service, I would recommend you try to do the same thing. The water level really varies on the Green River depending what time of year it is, and there is a dam up above, and they do a water release every year in the spring, and they actually did that release while we were there. And I had looked it up online, and they give you a general idea of when they'll do it, but they don't say when, but we knew it would be the week that they were there. And I'll show you later kind of how it affects it. But if you're there in the fall, there's a lot more availability for camping because the water's low and there's a lot of sandbars. I don't know if you can see this little area right here. I've got stuff in the way that I can't see it really well. But you can see that sometimes you're going east, sometimes you're going west, sometimes you're going north, sometimes you're going south. It's very confusing where you are. I mean, you follow along as best you can. You generally know, but there were a few times that those of us in the group were like, I think we're here. No, I think we're there. So it was really good to have GPS units, which a few people did. And really the only awkward or stressful part of this whole trip, I would say, 9 days being together, was finding campsites. It was a little difficult to find them. We were there at what you would call mid-water level. And at mid-water, you're too low to, quote, easily access the high water camps, but you also can't access the sandbars, which would be the low water. And so sometimes we would get to something and be like, well, that's not going to work for us for whatever reason. And so we ended up having 4 long paddling days or 5 paddling days, I guess, and 4 layover days. And so each day we paddled was about 24 miles on average. So it worked out really well. We had about a 3 to 4 mile per hour current that helped us. And I would say it was really a beautiful trip. I was never bored for 1 minute. My one concern I had before the trip was, is it going to feel claustrophobic, you know, with these, in these canyons? And it's not. They're just really beautiful. Let's see. And these are just a couple more of the pages. You can see where I marked some potential, all this handwriting here is potential campsites. And yet you wouldn't really know what it would be till you got there. You had to scout them out. And this is the end, is the Confluence. And I don't know, I just imagined in my mind when we got to the Confluence that it would be, I don't know. I know a lot of people get picked up there and there's different places you can stay there. And I somehow thought it would be like Party City or something. I don't know, but it's this you can see in this photo in the upper right. And it just doesn't look any different than any other part of the trip. But that's where the shuttle picks you up, and that's the end of the road there. This, down at the bottom of the screen, I don't, if anyone wants to try to write that down, otherwise I would suggest you just look at when this is, get the playback on it from the recording. But this is a website that has GPS waypoints, and that maybe Paula will mention more about that when she chats, but this was something she used and she loaded up on her GPS, I think. So here we are starting out. And you can see that we were very color coordinated. So we were at Texas Riverways. We had 4 cars, all of them the exact same color. You can see some of the boats are yellow and white. Everyone's got their blue IKEA bags. So it's very important to be color coordinated. And they loaded our boats onto a big van bus thing, I guess it was. You know, honestly, I can barely remember, but it was just us kayakers, just the 8 of us. And they dropped us off at that state park. And look at this big, beautiful boat launch area we had to launch in. So that was really a great start. The other thing I want to mention is using Texas, the shuttle service. They had a deal where if you would go there the day before, you could drop off like snacks and beverages, alcoholic if you want, anything you wanted cold. And they put it in a cooler, and on the day they picked you up, they dump a bunch of ice in. And when they meet you there, there's your cooler with all your goodies. And I'll tell you, after 9 days of really not having anything refrigerated, It was really great to have a cold beverage and good snacks. So highly recommended that you do that. This is also from that guidebook, and this just kind of shows you a little bit about the layering of the canyon, you know, that it was formed over, I guess, eons, and then erosion has carved it out. But down here at the bottom right, there we are in the Green River, and you look up, and really the colors that are shown on this are pretty similar to the colors you see when you're paddling. I mean, there's some really pretty blues in that you see. Very pretty. So, and there's that guidebook tells all about how these various layers were formed. And I'm sorry, I admit I never did read it, but they were beautiful to see. And this was our first night of camping. And this was really where these the formations just began. So I think our first day we paddled, I don't know, maybe 15 miles, maybe 20. We did it all in the afternoon. And we found this campsite, and I remember we trudged through the sand like 100 feet, maybe 200 feet. I was like, whoo, boy, I hope the others are easier than this. Oh, this trudging in the sand, this is tough work. Well, in the end, this turned out to be one of the easiest sites we had. We didn't know that this just easy, pull your boat up and trudge a little in the sand is about as easy as you could get there. And our first wildlife sighting was really not all that wild, but just beyond where we camped was some farmland, and some of our folks saw some cows. I did not see the cow, but I heard about it. Then high water camps. This was in the middle, kind of a high water camp a little bit, although we were lucky to have this weird kind of a shelf of sand that we could get boats up to. But the high water camps, when Mark talks about boats, maybe he can kind of touch on that more. But this, in all honesty, the Green River is meant to be, it's really probably more easily done in canoes, because when the water is rushing by and you're just trying to get into a high water camp up off kind of a little cliff, shall we say, really it would be very difficult to load and unload kayaks, but canoes would work a lot better. This picture in the bottom left looks kind of dirty and icky, and we paddled in stuff like this for a few days. And what that is really, it's just sand, the sand mixed in the water, because they did let water out of the dam. And when they did that, it caused some erosion and it caused stuff to get stirred up. And so the water is always brown, like you see in the middle picture, but it was like brown with bubbles for a few days. And this photo over on the right is one of our campsites that really is the kind of the dead end of a road. There's some kind of a road that accesses, and but luckily that was enough room for us to line up our tents along the far end of this road. And as luck would have it, we ended up on what is described as the best high water camp on the Green River. And it had all these beautiful trees and little, almost little private areas where, you know, your tent could be slightly separated from other people's tents. And there was a few great big boulders that could be used like tables. But look how the access is over here on the left. I mean, the water's way down there, and then you had to leave your boats down there. I mean, I guess you could drag them up, but why? And I remember at the two different steps up, like I had to grab onto the vegetation to not fall down. And then we still had to walk probably, I don't know, 100 feet to get to the campsites. But that being said, tricky access and erosion. Oh, the erosion. When we left there, our little platform where the boats were was starting to erode. I mean, we had to either launch somebody really early or move a boat. I don't recall exactly, but it was like, whoa, we're losing what little beach we have. But it was a beautiful campsite, and we were there for 2 nights with our layover day. This is was our really most open campsite we had. Just big flat desert everywhere, but it was really beautiful. And we could go for a hike that day. Stacy could talk about that. We did have some wind. I mean, if you look around, you'll see some trees and you'll be like, why didn't they camp under that tree? There were reasons, and I don't remember exactly what the reasons were. Maybe there was vegetation. The trees on the right, I think there were some people already camping over there. So this big flat area was nice, but putting that tarp up, it was so windy that a bucket of water got lifted up by the wind. And I think we took the tarp down and had to put it up again. But anyway, thank you to Mark and Janelle for bringing that tarp, because we camped here also for 2 nights and we certainly needed some shade. And we did have some lightning one day. And the picture on the bottom right, we have pulled over and most of us got out of our boats and sat on this little sandy sandbar. You can see I'm up high. I'm sitting on my PFD because apparently if lightning does strike, it can go through wet sand. So I'm doing everything I can to stay alive. On the left, it's just, honestly, I think this photo was taken when we took the jet boat out of there. I think Paula took this photo. But we saw very few people. And at one point we did run into a group with rafts or something, and must have been a commercial group because somehow beer was thrown and in the water. And I believe Monty for sure got a cold beer out of that deal. But really, we didn't see many people at all. There's just a very few places where roads come down to the river, and it was always almost disconcerting to see like a car, or we saw people on bicycles one day. It just, you know, we've been in our own world for most of those 9 days, and so it's really strange to see people. And this is our last campsite. We're at the Confluence. When we got there, it was super windy, and we all hovered really close to the edge of where the vegetation started, trying to stay out of the wind. The wind died down pretty quickly. But that's the sand that is there is the most fine sand you'd ever see in your life. And we were starting to have trouble with our tent zippers and even getting the poop containers to open. Monty can talk about that. But we spent 2 nights in this beautiful sandbar. And by the morning of when they picked us up there, 3 other parties had joined us, and there were about probably 20 people. It was real fun to talk to them about their trips as well. And this shows a little bit, if you look to the right, how big that sandbar was. So it was really a big, beautiful sandbar, and the Colorado River's off to the right and the Green River's off to the left. You can't really quite see it. But anyway, I did love the sandbar camping. And if I ever go back, I will go back in the fall so I can have sandbar camping. And here they are. They came pick us up in this jet boat, which you cannot believe would fit all the boats and all the gear and all the people, but it does. And the people, there's just 2 people there from their staff, and they loaded all the boats. I don't know if you can see over on the right, they're getting a canoe up there. They put our kayaks up. They took really good care of them, padding them with like old PFDs and stuff. They took super good care loading our kayaks when they dropped us off and when they picked us up. And then this is how they get you out of there. They go to a boat launch area south of town, maybe 5 miles, something like that. And we all get out of the boat. All our gear stays in it. And then they winch the boat up on this gigantic flatbed truck, and it drives back to town. They stop and get gas on the way. And we all got into an old refurbished school bus, and it took us to Texas. And when we got there, they left this big jet boat on top of this big flatbed, and then they lifted everything down from there. So your kayaks are up like, I don't know, 15 feet in the air, and they're lifting them down. But everybody from all the different parties helped each other get everything off. So it worked really well. I think that's all I've got to say. It was a magical trip. I love it. I highly recommend it.
Before I show my presentation, I'm going to show you my GPS, my Garmin inReach, kind of compared to the VHS HX890, time to give you an idea. And I'm going to share my screen as well. Presentation is about how I wanted to be sure I came back alive. So I'm going to talk to you about satellite communication and rescues. And this presentation is just going to introduce you to some of the satellite communication options and rescue, what they call insurance. It's not going to be health insurance, but it's to take care of rescue costs. And keep in mind, my presentation is limited to my own research and what my needs were. So I would encourage you to do your own research for these devices. And if anybody else has some knowledge about the topic, feel free to add your comments to this chat. So here are some of the most common satellite devices available. The first one on the left is called a rescue link, which Gina mentioned in our presentation last month that she owns. So if you're interested in that, she has that one. And technically that's a personal locator beacon. And it has the ability to send via satellite a rescue request with your GPS location. In the center here is a satellite phone, which we considered getting and ended up not because I had mine. And the last picture shows some of there's very many satellite messenger devices, and just like any electronic devices, these are always changing, including the first three are Garmin devices, and the last one is what's called a spot device. And these devices allow the user to request a rescue. They provide the exact GPS location, and they also have the ability to text via satellite. So next, I'm going to show you a video. Hang on. Oops. Hang on. I see you again. Hang on. About what happens when you press your SOS button.
What happens when you trigger an SOS on a Garmin device with inReach technology? The Garmin International Emergency Response Coordination Center, also known as IERCC, with professional 24/7 global monitoring, gets an alert, and a trained professional starts communicating with you. If you can't respond, the Garmin IERCC responder will initiate a rescue using your GPS coordinates. Whether you come across someone who needs help, you're stuck in a remote area, you're at sea and your boat is taking on water, or you're injured during an adventure, the Garmin IERCC will contact the appropriate responders and send them to your exact location. After the Garmin IERCC is aware of your situation and has contacted emergency services, they will reach out to your designated emergency contacts as listed in your account. If you're able, you can also use inReach satellite messaging to communicate with your loved ones. Garmin IERCC will stay in contact so you know what's happening. The Garmin IERCC may have you use inReach messaging to communicate directly with the emergency response team as needed. You can even cancel your SOS if you find a solution and no longer need assistance. So don't hesitate to trigger an inReach SOS.
Says it all, what a satellite communicating messenger device does and what the SOS button does. I guess I was really worried that somebody would get sick or something would happen to someone and we'd be out there and you are kind of not accessible. I was very surprised when we got there and I saw boats going up and down the river, motorboats. But there's plenty of times when there's nobody around. And so that's why having some sort of device that allows you to communicate by satellite seemed to be sensible. So how much do these things cost? If you're only planning one trip, you could consider renting. You could rent a satellite phone, and I called Texas today, and they do rent a spot device. So that's a satellite messenger. If you were interested in purchasing a device, you could consider a personal locator beacon, especially if you didn't want to use the device for something like hiking, where you might want to have the device for tracking and routing your trip and navigating. And as you can see, the Rescue Link, which is the personal locator beacon, doesn't require a subscription. And it also has advantage of a very long battery life. the limited research that I did indicated that the rescue plan insurance that you would purchase could be more expensive than the GEOS plan. And I'm going to talk about what the GEOS plan is in a little bit. And GEOS plans only work with certain devices. Rescue links and spots are not included. They just recently got rid of the spot device. So another ideas about the Garmin inReach Explorer. I think I mentioned a couple of things that, you know, it's good for tracking and routing, but it also gives you weather updates. You can even, on my inReach Explorer, you can upload marine charts onto it. And they also will pair with, by Bluetooth to an Earthlink app on your phone. So instead of having a small screen, you've got the size of your own cell phone as a screen. But the most important feature for me was the SOS incident management through the Garmin IERCC, and that's the Emergency Response Center that they actually now own. And it's also, the other reason is that I could use the GEOS rescue plan. And I'm just gonna quickly show you the GEOS rescue plans that are available to cover rescue costs, because I really don't know how much a rescue cost could be, but I don't really want to find out. Instead, most of us chose to use either the $25 or the $30 plan here, and that's good for a year and for $50,000 to $100,000 for any kind of rescue insurance. Seemed like it was worthwhile. Not all devices will pair with this GEOS plan, so that's something to keep in mind. There are other plans available, but when I looked around, as I said, this was the least expensive, and it's worldwide, 200 countries. Not that I'm going to 200 countries, but it's pretty comprehensive, 24/7. So if you have any questions about any of these devices, just let me know. My email is prbrotman@gmail.com. There is a learning curve for some of these, so keep that in mind. There's simpler ones, harder ones. As I said, I'm very happy to give you more information if you want to contact me.
Okay, as you probably know, this is a leave no trace trip, and they mean leave no trace. If you have a fire someplace, you make a fire in a certain thing, you take out all your ashes, everything. So leave no trace. The only thing you don't have to take out is your pee. Everything else has to come out. That means you got to pack out your poo. 9 days worth of poo. Oh man, that's per person. That's a lot. There will be no live demonstrations tonight, that's for sure. So, the environment down there is very sensitive. And so digging a hole to bury your poo like you do on a lot of camping trips or hiking trips is strictly forbidden. There's even places you're not allowed to walk, certain kind of vegetation. So it's very fragile down there. As far as your urine, you're supposed to pee in the river or on the wet sand near the river's edge. Now that wasn't always done for a lot of different reasons, because it's kind of hard to do one without the other sometimes. If you do pee in the river, there's not a lot of privacy along the river's edge. So I hope you're with friends who will give you the privacy that you need and want. That's always a nice thing to have, some privacy. You have some options for packing out your poo. If you are in a canoe, you can rent a still toilet sized to the number of days and the people in your party to use. And the rent for that is about $75. Or if you're a kayaker, you can rent a steel poop chute that holds about 4 days worth of waste and costs about $35 plus $4 for a wag bag. And if you've never seen them, this is a wag bag. There's several different kinds. And I'll sure demonstrate that later. So that's what, let's see. You are supposed to have enough capacity for 20 cubic inches of poo per day. This block, which is 2.5 by 4 by 4, is 2 days worth of poo. You have to have something to carry 9 days worth.
Oh, yeah.
For some of us, one day's worth. For some of us, that's 1 week's worth. I don't know. Not a lot.
One day.
And there are rangers along the river, and they can and they will stop and check and make sure you're all fully equipped. With the kayakers, it was pretty obvious, our group anyway, that we knew what we were doing, and we all had all of our gear, so it wasn't a problem. So for our 9-day trip, we needed 180 cubic inches of storage per person. So we made our poop chutes out of some PVC, and we used 6-inch and 4-inch PVC. 6-inch diameter PVC, 10 inches long, will give you about 14 days worth of storage. This is what one of the, if you can see that, this is, it's not mine, it belongs to somebody else whose name I will not mention if she's not around. But anyway, this is what we used for our poo. And because of all the sand down there, these lids are hard to get off sometimes. So I made it out of plywood. It's a simple little wrench, put it on top, and you can open them up. These lids aren't all the same size. You need one of these for each size of, whoops. Drop it. Get it where you can see it. One size for each of the lids. If you have a 4-inch diameter one of these tubes, it'll have to be about 16 inches long, and that'll give you enough poo for about 10 days or storage. To make these things, you need the piece of PVC for the middle, a cap on the bottom, which you glue on. I'm gonna get further away from this. I think you can see it better. And on the top, there's 2 parts to the top. One is a ring you put on here. It's got threads in it. The other one is the screw on top. This one, 6-inch, will cost you about $45 to make. The 4-inch ones are only about $15 or less. So they're bigger, they're longer, not bigger around, just longer. So that's what you can do, is how to make those things. Now there's a thing called poo powder. I hope you can read that, looks backwards to me. And this is the same gel type stuff in babies' diapers and stuff. It's just a powder, and it takes about a spoonful of that, teaspoon of that, every time you go to the bathroom. And this was about $35, maybe $40 on Amazon. And I know several of us I left it by our toilet, and we used it. Everybody used it, and other people had their own. Some people would just go on the ground and then use a doggy bag to pick it up with and put it in their poop chute. Most people used a big industrial size coffee filter, which I don't have those with me, but I have just a regular coffee filter. The industrial ones are quite a bit bigger. This goes on the ground. You can squat and go to the bathroom on this, add your poo powder to it, and that will start the breakdown of all of your poo and everything. And then you carefully pick this up and put it in your, I'll get this where you can see it. Put this in your tube that has a plastic bag in it. So this, all your waste goes in there. Then you put your tube, your plastic bag back inside. And then we have a closed cell foam that you can make these if you have some foam. Put a zip tie on it for a handle, and this goes in here, and you can push everything down to the bottom. And then on top of this, if you want, you can put a roll of toilet paper right here. So when you're done, then you put your lid on, and it has to be watertight. They don't want any leakage. I was given this foam, just a piece of closed cell foam, of which you can make those sliding parts for.
I think we had you on.
I find it very difficult with my knees that don't work real well to squat down to go to the bathroom. So I made out of PVC a toilet seat and framework. Like you can all see that. This is really nice. You just, this is on the ground, you put your coffee filter on the bottom, on the ground. You sit there, you do your business. It's very comfortable. You can read a book. You can watch the river flow by, whatever you want to do. But it's comfortable. And for some of us older people, it worked really well. And this thing comes apart. You can take it apart. Everything comes off. And I carried all of this in a dry bag on my bow. And Janelle and Mark were kind enough to carry the toilet seat for me, or for us. Everybody used it. When we would go to a campsite, we would find a nice private spot, set that up. And I had a wrench by it. I had the poo powder by it. And I had a bag or a container of wiping diapers by it to use. So it helped keep things kind of cleaned up. And the wag bag, when you open these up, here's what the bag looks like. Inside is the bag that you go to the bathroom in. And that's quite large. So if you put all of this into here, it takes up a lot of space. That's why the coffee filters work so much better. These, if you want to buy these, are, I'm thinking $4 a piece. And they have the same poo powder inside of them to solidify everything that we were doing with the coffee filters. And by using the poo powder, when you are finished with your trip, it's legal to dump all of your waste right into garbage. You don't have to worry about it being sewer waste or something like that. Just like putting a baby's diaper in the garbage can. You can do the same thing with this stuff. Couple more quick little things. Everybody carried these on the back of their kayaks because sometimes they smell. So you want them downwind. So carry it on the back of your kayak. And some people put bungees on them, like this one, to help tie it down. I actually drilled some holes, put some little nylon carabiners or hooks on it to hook it to my bungees on my deck. When I got finished, even with my great invention of a wrench, I could not open my 6-inch poop chute, and I just threw the whole thing away. There's that one place in Moab where you can take these when you're finished, and it's outside of town. And they're supposed to charge you $5 per bag of poo you have in there. Well, none of us bothered to count them. So they just said, "Oh, go ahead and put them, dump it in there. We don't care." So a lot of people just opened up the things, dumped it all into their garbage, which had the poo powder in it, and that was fine. And I just threw mine away. So basically, that's what you did for going to the bathroom. You probably could try to use this as your toilet, just to sit on it, but it'd be kind of hard. So squatting on the ground onto the filter or making yourself a little toilet, either way would work. So that's it in a nutshell, I think. Unless I forgot something, I don't know.
Monty, do you want me to show that video?
Yeah, if you want to show the video, that'd be great.
Okay.
How do I get it off the screen? I guess Jeff will have to do that for me.
think
Okay.
that I can do this.
What's the video?
Can you all see a path through the dirt?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just seeing that mine open. Oh,
You can imagine the Jaws soundtrack while you're watching this. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about boats, and with any luck, I'll be able to share a screen presentation. Let's see here. What do we got? So we're talking about boats on the Green River. Perfect. Motorized craft are allowed, but not personalized motorcraft. So no jet skiing, and we saw no water skiers. SUPs and rafts are allowed. We passed one group of SUP paddlers out for a 3-day trip, actually, and we were passed by several large motorized raft groups, although they didn't generate any wakes. So it wasn't as if they were huge consumers of the river. The large raft groups were an excellent resource for beer, as we can talk about later. The outfitters, oops, here, let me change the slide. The outfitters sent out canoe pontoons, which is what you're looking at here. They were basically 2 canoes held together by 2x4s and clamps. These pontoons were extremely maneuverable. They were great for kids, and extremely okay for the stretch that we paddled through. I would note that past the point where we got taken out was whitewater, and these canoe pontoons would not have been appropriate for that particular part of the river. Let's see where we are. Oh, here we are. Okay, our groups consisted of 5 kayaks and 1 canoe. All the kayaks were ocean kayaks. They weren't river kayaks. And the canoe was a 16-foot Old Town Penobscot. River kayaks would not have been a good idea for this trip, as they don't have enough or any cargo capacity. And keep in mind, at minimum, you need to carry food, sleeping bags, poop, possibly clothes, possibly other stuff. We had about a 3-knot current throughout the entire trip. We didn't run any rapids, so ocean kayaks were fine. All of our kayaks carried equipment on the decks. The river is narrow and warm, so capsizing really wasn't a life-threatening episode. You'll notice on the back of most of these boats, the aforementioned poop tubes, and that's where people strap them on. The canoe carried gear for 2 people, and because we don't have hatches, we used 3 Duluth packs and carried a cooler. Duluth packs, if you don't know, are just basically big sacks with straps on it. The canoe also carried a 5-gallon water cube, 2 ukuleles in a waterproof bag, a spare paddle, and personal bags. So we traveled pretty heavy, but seeing as how it was pretty easy to get stuff in and out of the boat, why not? With 6 boats and low water, landing was a problem. And because of low water, many marked campsites required lifting and carrying boats 3 to 6 feet up. Sometimes we couldn't tie up because of gear and changing water levels. And this limited our choice of campsites. Many campsites marked on the maps were inaccessible. And in particular, the tamarisks have taken over the river. So tamarisks, if you don't know, are like willows that just form an impenetrable barrier. So as much as you'd like to cut through them, it's going to take you a lot of time to break through that. Landings had to be large enough to stage 5 kayaks. It would have taken forever if you could only launch one boat at a time. And keep in mind, these are loaded, so carrying and lifting is limited. Canoes do have an advantage here, as they can be carried empty to the river and then loaded when in the water. Kayaks need to be on land to allow for stuffing gear in hatches. I would like to point out Susan's elegant exit technique from her boat. This is called a dry exit versus a wet exit. So much of the shoreline is either vertical, impenetrable, it has tamarisk bushes, or it's unstable sandbars. This is an example of one of the large sandbars in the river. Camping here would have been possible, but questionable due to the lack of shade and possible release of water from the dam. Finally, the Green River flows at 3 knots, and we had no problem keeping the group together. And besides, it's not a race. You'll want to explore and admire the shoreline. However, you do have to plan ahead when landing. If you pass a landing site, you're going to need to work to go upriver. So the current is substantial. It's not enough to throw you over, but it is enough for you to want to require to think about what you're doing beforehand. Okay, that's what I have to say about.
So I did look up why the Green River is called green when it actually does look fairly brown. And it was originally named the Spanish River. It was renamed in 1824. Probably for the color derived in places from green soapstone banks along its course. So, but I would have said it was brown. So there was tons of water. However, it was not drinkable in the state it was in. Very silty, and our filters would have been clogged in no time. So, and just for reference, you need to carry about 1 gallon per person per day. Now, some folks decided that they would carry water, and we did have a 5-gallon collapsible bucket. However, I had read about and heard about this really cool trick about desilting water. So I just thought it was such a chemistry experiment that I thought it was fabulous. So let me see if I can get this. Oh no, oh well. So the things that you would need is a collapsible bucket. We actually had like a big 5-gallon painter's bucket because we had the canoe, we could carry it in that. However, with a kayakers, a collapsible bucket is the thing you'd need. Alum, and I'll talk about alum in a second. You still need your tried and true water filter. And then you need a clean storage container. So alum is aluminum sulfate, and it's a type of salt that's been used for hundreds of years, as one place I read, for in the pickling process. It's also the aluminum that's used in deodorant, and it's used as a mordant for dye, and it's actually used at water purification plants. It's tasteless, odorless, and easily obtainable and cheap. We just got alum at the grocery store, and I think the container was maybe $3 for a small tin. Now, what alum does is it has excellent coagulation properties. The alum, with alum, the particles of the alum, I know, I'm not seeing all of my slide, that's why. I'm not quite sure. Well, the alum, causes all of the particles of silt to bind together, making them heavier so that that silt just drops to the bottom of the bucket a lot quicker than they would do without the alum. So how much alum do you use? Now this, per the National Park Service and a couple other guides I saw, was 1/5 of a teaspoon of alum per gallon, or a teaspoon of alum per 5-gallon bucket. There was some concern about whether the alum would affect our digestive tracts or cause Alzheimer's or cancer, but in this very small quantity, the risks were minimal given the benefits of safe drinking water. So you'll see we did a little time test. I got some silt from Monty that he had brought. The bucket on the left here, we started at noon, and by 4, it was still really silty. That was without the alum. At 4 o'clock, same bucket, I put a teaspoon of alum, and by about 5:30, it was looking pretty good. What we found in the field was actually that the alum, I don't know if we actually ever timed it, but it seemed to me the 5-gallon bucket with a tablespoon, or I mean a teaspoon of alum, would settle in about 25 to 30 minutes. So people, you could fill a bucket, let it sit overnight and filter it in the morning, but the alum just made it happen really quickly. And then we had cool water to drink as well. So now it looks clean, but desilting the water is just the first step. And I don't know if you can see, but this is actually all of the silt is in the bottom, and this is how clear the water got. The water is actually up to the rim. So desilting was essential to get the water clear enough to put through our filter systems without clogging the filters instantly. So what next? Oh yeah, gosh, I wish I could find out how to get my slide. So Mark and I had a Katadyn filter. We actually had 2 of them that we brought along just in case one failed. It provided a nice workout for biceps as well. It took approximately 48 strokes per minute to provide a liter of clean drinking water, so about 20 minutes per gallon. Okay, so the good things about the Katadyn is that it's effective at removing all of those nasty little bugs that you don't want to get. And we were looking at, how often do you replace the filter? And they talk about replacing it every 6 months with continuous use. However, we've had ours quite a long time, and it's if you let it dry out completely between uses, it's good for up to 13,000 gallons. So we felt like that was great. But had I known about this beforehand, Paula's gravity filter was amazing. She had a platypus. I think this might be the one, Paula. I just grabbed one that looked like yours. It filters by gravity. So again, you desilt the water, pour the clean water into the dirty reservoir, and then it goes through a filter and into the clean reservoir. Your presentation is, oh, okay. So it was really very cool, and I would consider getting one of these. It was just so much quicker. Well, and it actually was, it was about 2 liters per minute. So it was almost twice as fast, but you weren't also pumping. So the gravity did all the work. Simply hang it in a tree, fill the 4-liter dirty reservoir, hang it from a tree branch, and in a few minutes you'll have 4 liters of clean water to drink. And here's kind of a this is what it looked like before desilting. This was after the alum. We just had the silt in the bottom, and this was after filtering. So that's water.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Mark gets lots of credit for this. So part of our trip was also hiking. Some of us like to hike as much as we like to kayak. And so we were really looking forward to that. So we took some hikes hold on, Mark, how do I get this to go forward? And so this is our group minus me, getting ready to go on a hike. We did, each day that we stayed over, we took a hike. And so here are some photos from some of the hikes that we did. One of the places we went to is a place called Newspaper Rock that we had read about in the map or chart that we have that Janelle talked about and Chris talked about. Besides showing the camping sites, it also talks a lot about different hikes to go on. One thing that some of us were concerned about, I was pretty concerned, was rattlesnakes, but I will say that we never saw any, but that was something that we read we could definitely run into, and there's lots of rocks for them to hide under, but they weren't there. So this is a close-up of some of the petroglyphs. They were really cool. And one of the things we didn't know is how much of this was real and how much of it was fake, but we decided to believe it was real. This is our hiking fashion. It was kind of hot, somewhere between 80 and 90 degrees. And so some of us brought an umbrella, one person, Chris. So that was that. And just look at the beautiful landscape that we had. Monty's showing how it was kind of cold and he was heating up his hands from the warmth from the rock. It was actually permeating out. So it was cool. Just beautiful. And this is some of there wasn't very much flora or grass or plants, but there were some. And that which was there was really very cool. The plant on the left that had just finished flowering, it was really pretty, but that's a little bit, the foot on the right is blurry, but you get an idea of how pretty that purple was. Prickly, didn't want to step on that. So there's lots of different kinds of surfaces that we walked on. And on the left, this is it was like a huge, huge agate. And we saw lots of those all around. The right is just, I don't know, some of the stones that we walked on. Sometimes it was really hard to figure out where the trail was because you were walking on this kind of stuff. This cryptosoil, this you could not step on because it took what was it, 12 years or something? If you stepped on it, it took years and years and years before it would grow back. It didn't look like it, but it was super, super fragile. So we were very careful about where we put our feet so that way we didn't step on that. We were cautioned before we went to make sure we didn't do that. This was a really cool geyser that we came to. We didn't see the geyser, but this is the rock that was on it. It was very cool. See all the different colors and the different textures. At one place, there was a Gila cliff called the Granary, and that's what this is. That's a close-up of it. That's a little further away. And again, these are things that are written up in the book that we knew to watch for and to go to. Just a nice evening hike. Some of the landscape that we saw on land, which is, you kind of see it from the water, but during the hikes, the landscape was a little bit different than it is on the water. And the photo on the left, if you look at the top, you'll see I was down at the bottom. I went way down there, and that was Paula and Susan way up top. So it kind of gives you a sense of scale. It was just awe. There's our group. Our last little hike from the Confluence. And we're all waiting for the boats. So that was our hike.